Brad, I hope you're having a great Tuesday. Welcome to the game in T-Town.
I'm having a great one, Ryan. Thank you. It's funny how in our group every Monday we generally have several conversations about Tua because there's always something new after each weekend of games, and I think the most amazing one to me after this past weekend is that his worst game of the season so far, QBR-wise, you may have already talked about this, but his worst game this season would actually rank 26th best in the FBS. So all 6 of his games are among the 26th best by any quarterback in the country this season. That's pretty remarkable.
It is amazing, and I saw one of your guys there, and I'm sorry I forgot the name there, but he was talking about the QPR and listing and he just talked. I mean, they're overwhelming a little bit. I mean you just it is like the quarterback rating. I think that if he continues this, he's going to shatter the record by like 50 or 60 points in college football if he continues at the current pace that he's doing right now.
Yeah. Now, of course, what we do with total QBR is different from that. QBR is on a 0 to 100 scale, so there's only so much better on that scale that you can be from anyone before you. But yeah, the traditional QB passer rating or pass efficiency rating that the NCAA has used for so long, there's a lot of room there, and I've seen some of those numbers too. That he's well above what others before him have done. But using total QBR, one of the things that comes across there is the rushing, which is obviously not a big part of what he does, but it's such a big part of what quarterbacks in general do today in college football that, there's only so much value in showing what someone does as a passer and not looking at anything else. And QBR is also looking at turnovers, and while passer rating is capturing interceptions, it's not capturing fumbles. And so there's a lot that goes into it, and whichever one you use, too, has been exceptional.
When you look at Alabama, and maybe this is some of the measurables that you guys use there, what do you think is going to be Alabama's toughest test that is left on the schedule? Now, we could certainly project ahead to SEC championship game, but let's just stick with the regular season. Who do you think is going to challenge the Crimson Tide that has the personnel to maybe present some hurdles for Alabama?
Well, I think that in their own way, the 3 opponents in November all have the capability defensively of challenging them more than anyone will have up to that point. Now, how significant is that challenge? That remains to be seen. I'm looking forward to it. I really can't wait to see this offense, have to face a defense that should be capable of making it punt a few times, which is something we really haven't seen this year. And so, that'll be the first part of it. I mean, my instinct is to say the biggest test is going to be LSU because the game is on the road. But I do also recognize that LSU is in a very tricky spot right now in terms of its mentality. If they were to lose to both Georgia and Mississippi State before Alabama comes in, and they're on a 3-game losing streak, all the positivity that had built up toward last weekend's game with Florida will have reversed itself at that point. And I'm not to say that would make Tiger Stadium an easy place to play, but certainly if the fans aren't optimistic, if LSU's not really doing anything other than trying to play spoiler, that changes the feel of the game. And so, it's possible that if it plays out that way, the Mississippi State game could actually be a bigger game. But all 3 of those, like I said, all 3 of those teams are capable of giving Alabama problems in different ways. I think LSU maybe is a better pass defense. Mississippi State certainly is pretty good at stopping the run, and so we'll see. But I think the college football world can't wait to see Alabama tested, especially if they get a test away from home.
Hey, Brad, here in Tuscaloosa, we had Meltdown Monday yesterday. Nick Saban said that if you allow 31 points, you don't really feel like that you beat anybody. And you got to understand the standard here around defense is not what we've seen from this unit. Is some of those showing up in the metrics that you guys use defensively for Alabama? Is there some signs that are currently in this first 6 games that might point to problems on down the road?
Look, I think if you look at, well, there are a couple things. All right, so one is defensive efficiency, and Alabama ranks third in that, which in itself is not bad, but their number is below 90, and that's very un-Alabama-like. Once again, that's a 0 to 100 scale, so it's it's good for pretty much any other team in college football to be at 88, but that is substandard for Alabama. And then the other thing is the rush defense, which, look, I can think of a whole lot of that came in garbage time, but there's enough of it that didn't, that it is cause for concern. And we've all seen year after year, it's like whenever teams try to run on Alabama, they basically just run into a wall at the line of scrimmage, and that's it. And they pretty much just become one-dimensional right out of the gate. And you're not seeing that from opponents this year, except the problem for them is that Alabama's offense is scoring so quickly that by the time they get to the second quarter, they're in a mode where they pretty much have to score to stay in the game. And a lot of teams at that point kind of become more pass-oriented just because they've got to score and they got to score quickly. And so that kind of gets them out of their game. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what Alabama is able to do against, let's say, Mississippi State. I think will be the first real test. When you get against a team that can run the ball that well, especially in the first half of the game, when all the pressure is on that defense to stop the run, how well will they do? Because to me, Ryan, the big question with Alabama, we know the offense is as good as it's ever been. It's the best it's been. The question is, will the defense continue to improve, or will the defense improve from where it is right now? Because if it does, and it gets back to that neighborhood that we're used to seeing Alabama defenses in, I don't think anyone can beat Alabama. If it is an Alabama-like defense to go with this offense, it's game over for the rest of college football. The hope that everyone else has is that Alabama does not progress defensively from where it is right now. And, of course, if they had some injuries on time, if the Diggs injury is potentially a big one, but if there were some others and guys who weren't available, once it gets to SEC championship game, playoff time, that could be big as well. Because ultimately, I think, like I said, anyone's chance of beating Alabama rests on Alabama's defense not being good by Alabama standards.
Let's just kind of carry these teams over. Let's assume that Clemson's there. Notre Dame, if they continue to win, certainly looks like they're going to be a playoff team. Ohio State's probably going to be there as well. What kind of scenario do you see where you could get 2 SEC teams in the college football playoffs? Because we're about 3 weeks away from those first initial rankings, I believe.
Yep.
Alabama, Georgia is a big topic of conversation here locally. Do you see a scenario where both of those teams get in?
Well, I definitely see scenarios where they both get in. The question is could they both get in if they're 3 undefeated teams? Or I should say they're 3 other undefeated teams. In other words, is there any chance that the loser of the SEC championship game could get in over an undefeated team? And I really don't see it because those are the 3 that we're talking about. We're talking about Clemson, Ohio State, and Notre Dame. I think if it plays out that way, that the SEC championship game loser is probably out. Now, if you get into some other scenarios, this really far-fetched stuff, like let's say NC State were to actually go undefeated to the ACC, or Colorado goes undefeated to the Pac-12, I could see the possibility that the SEC championship game loser is considered by the committee to be a better team than one of those, even though that other team has a 0 in the loss column. But if you're talking about the teams that everyone thought would be great before the season started and they turn out to validate all those opinions, I don't see any of those teams being left out if they're undefeated.
Is the matchup that you would like to see, is it Alabama, Ohio State?
I don't have a preference right now. I think that all of those opponents are potentially interesting because they have good quarterback play. And that's the first thing that it's going to take. You've got to be able to score with Alabama. And right now, in fact, I would say the one that has the biggest questions at quarterback is Clemson, because they have a true freshman who, has only started twice. And that's the issue with Clemson is, will he continue to show that improvement? Just like I was talking about with the Alabama defense. If they improve week in and week out and are a completely different defense, a lot better by the time that we get to December, then good luck everyone else. Well, the same thing with Clemson. I mean, I think at this point it's difficult to look at Clemson and really like their chance to win the whole thing because of the quarterback play. But if he keeps getting better and is obviously better by the time they do get to the playoff, then I think they're as capable of winning it as everyone else. I mean, you could certainly argue Clemson has the best defense, and that obviously matters when you get to the postseason. The question is, will their offense be close enough to everyone else's that defense can be the difference maker?
Brett, are you in the camp that Tua is the best player in college football? I mean, you like his chances to win the Heisman?
I do, but I also am very well aware that all it takes is one bad game against the wrong opponent late in the season, and that can disappear very quickly. I mean, we remember just 3 years ago that Leonard Fournette was very heavy favorite for wherever odds were being offered on the Heisman Trophy, going into that Alabama game, and Alabama shut him down, and then just like that, I mean, he ended up having one more bad game after that and didn't even make it to New York for the presentation. And those things happen. And so, look, if Tua were to go out there and throw a couple picks and Alabama loses a game and ends up, not getting to the SEC championship game because of it, then, well, actually, even at this point, those possibilities are starting to diminish. Actually, with with Auburn and Mississippi State and LSU having all lost games in conference play now, those possibilities are reduced. But the point is still that when you do what he has done for the first 6 weeks, you set the bar so high that it's difficult for you to live up to that standard. And I'm not saying that he's not allowed to throw an interception at any point this season, because certainly he is. Everyone else does. But he could get built up to the point where the expectation for him is so great that if he went out one game and, completed only 50% of his passes and had, one touchdown and 2 picks, that people's opinion of him, just changes drastically. And so while, yes, he is the clear-cut favorite right now, I think he needs to continue to play well. That offense needs to continue to play well. And Alabama, of course, has to continue to win. We're
talking to Brad Edwards, and I want to go to this football power index for just a couple of minutes. I like a lot of the different metrics that you guys set up. Let me skip on down to a team that's in this state because I was looking at the projected win total. You guys have dropped Auburn down to a 7-win football team, 7.5.
Yeah.
I guess we could round up to 8, and then a 4.5. It seems like the analytics are not showing they have a lot of faith in the Tigers getting the job done.
Right. So they have 2 losses at the moment, and FPI is giving them a very low percentage chance to win at Georgia or at Alabama. And so you play that out by the percentages, and that makes them a likely 8-4 team at best. And then you start looking at, some of the others like at Ole Miss, home against A&M. Those are really the only 2 in question. They're going to beat Tennessee, and they're going to beat Liberty. At least I would be shocked if they didn't win those 2 games. But yeah, but what you look at is the possibility now, which is something, 3 weeks ago we weren't even considering the possibility they could lose to Ole Miss or at home against A&M. And if they were to drop either one of those games, then yeah, you're looking at 7-5, and if they were to drop both of them, 6-6. And it's kind of crazy to think how much they've fallen off. Although I think most of us could see it coming. The way that people were talking about Auburn internally. I mean, like just the Auburn fans I know were about ready to jump off a cliff this time last week, and that was before they lost to State. They were just so distraught with their offense, and I'm sure you had talked about it a good bit. But for whatever reason, people nationally weren't seeing it. I was just kind of amused by the fact that Auburn kept climbing up the polls, and they were all the way back to number 8, even though they just couldn't move the football and couldn't score. And so, it finally caught up with them last weekend. And now the question is, especially as there, all these reports of dissent in the locker room and all that stuff, will they keep it together and even get to the Georgia game without losing a third time? And yeah, because if they lose a third one before Georgia, they are almost certainly going to end up 7-5.
Yeah, I guess it would be the same way if you've got an offensive-minded head coach, or like here in Tuscaloosa, if you begin to question the defensive side of the football for Nick Saban. I guess we are in one sense, but not really. I mean, we are, but
very
we're not.
Different. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look. So to your point, I mean, we're questioning Alabama's defense because it's not meeting the standard of previous Alabama defenses, but nationally, it's still very good. As I said, Alabama's third in defensive efficiency. But if you look at Auburn, as far as offensive efficiency, and obviously with the reputation of Gus Malzahn, they're normally a very good offensive team. They're 76th right now in offensive efficiency, and that's adjusted for the quality of the defenses that you're facing. So I mean that's bad. As I said, the 0 to 100 scale. So 50 is average. Auburn's at 46, which means they're a below average offensive team, which anyone in the SEC who's been watching them play would agree with that. They're a below average offensive team.
Yeah, and I'll just add this to it. We had two defensive backs that played here for 4 or 5 years in Tuscaloosa yesterday on the show, and because of what's been conditioned in their brain of what is acceptable here in Tuscaloosa and what's not acceptable, I mean, you would have thought these two players, which are brilliant players, high football IQ, they were about to jump off the cliff. I mean, we're talking about players because they know what has been engraved in their brain of acceptable and unacceptable, and both of them were like, it's really, really bad, and it's not really that bad from a national level. It's just the standard that's been created here in Tuscaloosa, and it's kind of fun to hear those guys analyze football. It's kind of unique.
I mean, you look around other top teams. Ohio State has a lot of talent on defense, but they just continue week after week to give up huge plays. I mean, last week was the first time that Alabama really gave up anything before garbage time. I mean, even though teams had moved the ball on them, they really hadn't given up anything of significance on the scoreboard prior to garbage time, like I said, except for last week. Whereas Ohio State, they've found themselves in some battles they probably shouldn't have been in because they keep allowing 50, 60-yard touchdowns to teams that aren't as talented as they are. So, I mean, they're Alabama problems, and then they're everybody else problems, and you're talking about Alabama problems, which is only winning a game by 34 because your defense allowed some completions to a Power 5 offense.
Connect with Brad Edwards, Brad Edwards, on the Twitter account, ESPN.com. You'll be able to hear him on Saturdays right here on Tide 102.9 on ESPN Radio as they break down games. Where are you guys going this weekend, Brad?
We'll be in Bristol. We usually don't travel the first 2 weeks of October because of baseball playoffs, which there are a lot of affiliates around the country that take those baseball games instead of our show. So without as big of an audience, we typically stay at home. So we'll be here, and we'll see if LSU can give us a game. It's not a incredibly interesting week when you look at the very top teams, just because Clemson's off, Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame are all huge favorites. Georgia is the one that looks like it could get a test, and I think we'll learn a lot from what happens in Baton Rouge this weekend, what Alabama might be up against a few weeks later.
Brad Edwards, I appreciate you for being a part of the show, and I hope you have a great day, sir. Thank you again.
Thank you too, Ryan. Take care.